Hello, everybody. It's Randy Selzer here. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we have a very special guest. Jason Marino is joining us. He is a lawyer with a firm down in Austin, Texas, although he's based in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and he has a lot of experience in the real estate sector, both as an attorney and also as an investor. He's done a lot of work in real estate himself. So, welcome, Jason. Thanks for being on board today.
Thanks, Randy. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
No problem. Nice to have you here. Tell us a little bit about yourself, just a little bit about your background, where you grew up, where you went to school, a little bit about your
Sure,
background in
sure.
the legal profession.
Yeah, so I'm originally from the East Coast, Mid-Atlantic region, so New Jersey, South New Jersey. Grew up there, went to college in DC, then abruptly decided that things were too expensive on the East Coast for law school, and so decided to move to the Midwest where things are a lot more reasonable. So did my Juris Doctorate in St. Louis, Missouri at Washington University.
Okay.
Began work very, very briefly with a plaintiff's law firm. I don't know what they'd be called in Canada, but basically contingency law, where you front the cost of the lawsuit and then you take a percentage. Found out very quickly that it wasn't for me. And then after about 6 months, so this would have been 2011, I began my career in real estate law, and I've been there ever since in different niches. So now I'm a real estate attorney, but I specialize in asset protection. So for the last couple of years, I've been with Royal Legal Solutions. Before that, I was with a mid-sized firm, worked with a lot of commercial development, mineral development, energy, that type of thing. So good broad base of experiences. And then in that interim, around 2014, I think probably like a lot of your viewers and people who invest, I kind of fell into real estate investing without knowing it. I had a house that was a bit too big for my wife and I, and we decided to just rent out some rooms in it because we were in an oil field rich area, and so there were a lot of people that were coming in, and rooms for rent were in high demand. So we kind of fell into it, ended up paying my mortgage that way during the time that I was living there, and figured out that this is a really good source of income. And then from that, just kind of spiraled off into short-term investing, long-term investing, as short-term rentals, long-term rentals, medium-term now as well. Did some wholesaling as well and some other work, and still do. So I've had kind of a broad array of different things. So, but it's been fun, very fun.
You're going to fit right in here, man. Let me tell you, you're going to fit right in. So
Yeah, jack of all trades, master of none. But
no, don't say that. I don't believe that. But most of my audience is within Canada, although we do draw people from all over, from the US and also from other
sure.
countries as well. And you and I talked just briefly before we started the recording today that there are a few differences in the real estate market between the US and Canada. Not too many. Like a lot of the stuff is the same. And when you're an investor, you're looking at the same sort of things.
Sure.
The banking system is a little bit different. We
Hmm.
talked briefly about the mortgages in Canada, in the US, again, for the benefit of people listening in, and maybe especially for Americans listening in. You guys typically go out, you get a 30-year mortgage, and that mortgage rate is fixed for 30 years. Very the way it works. Up in Canada, it's a little different where we have a 30-year amortization. So the loan is paid off over 30 years. But typically every 5 years, the interest rate it renews. It has to be renewed at current rates. So
Okay.
right now, the situation we're in is that 5 years ago, a typical mortgage rate up here was 2%. A lot of people got
Oh, wow.
mortgages at 2%, and now they're having to renew at 4.5%. So
Sure.
it's
That
a,
hurts.
it's a problem, and for investors too, it's made a difference where there was positive cash flow before. Now with the higher rates that they have to renew at, it's created some issues where maybe there isn't positive cash flow. Oddly enough, I was expecting I don't want to say it was a crash, but I was expecting a big slowdown. There was a slight slowdown when these rate increases started last year in March of
Mhm.
2022. And it did slow down, but the real estate market up here is just booming. Like it's unbelievable. Toronto, especially, and Vancouver out on the west coast of Canada.
Sure.
We have a lot of immigration here, lots of legal immigration coming in.
Sure.
And it's just unbelievable. And in fact, last year I read a recent report that 1 million people were admitted into Canada last year,
Oh,
and our population is only 36 million. So
sure.
proportionately,
Yeah.
it's huge. And those are official immigrants. We let in about 250,000 Ukrainian refugees, which is, I guess, the right thing to do, plus foreign students, plus foreign workers. Just like you guys have foreign workers, we
Sure.
have foreign workers as well. And it added up to almost 1 million people. The problem in the big cities in Canada is that they have not managed that process. And I'm a pro immigration guy, pro
Sure.
legal immigration guy, but nobody stopped to think that, well, maybe we don't have enough houses, we don't have enough dwellings for all these people to live in. So we've got tremendous price appreciation here, tremendous rents for if you're an investor. Right now in the city of Toronto, if you want to rent a condo, like a little 600 square foot condo, you're looking at about $3,000 a month.
Oh, wow.
3,000
Wow, that's
for
incredible.
600 square feet downtown. So
Sure.
that's crazy, I think.
Mhm.
From an investment point of view, there's some great returns to be made. But the problem also is that because prices are so high, a lot of investors have been looking further afield just to find
Sure.
cheaper stuff. A lot of them have gone out to Alberta, which is a Western Canadian
Oh,
province
okay.
north of Texas, basically. So a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah, I
them,
know. So I've done some work in Calgary with oil companies out there. So yeah, I think that's
excellent.
Alberta, right? Mhm.
That's it. That's exactly where it is. Yeah. And the prices there had been a bit depressed for a while, but not anymore because a lot of people from other parts of Canada have been buying, snapping them up
Okay.
there like there's no tomorrow.
Sure.
So, what do you want to talk about today? That's my preamble. I tend to ramble on a lot, but I'm going to shut up eventually and let you do the talking. One of the suggested topics was how do you protect yourself if you're an investor? Are there ways to sort of shield yourself? Because in real estate, there's always a chance that something could go wrong and somebody could want to sue you or something. Are there ways that investors can protect their assets from that sort of litigation, something like that?
Sure, sure. And obviously, this is American from an American standpoint, but I do think that the legal systems are at least vaguely similar, coming
Pretty,
from drawing
pretty close.
from yeah, and I do have some experience in some of the other, well, one really, British Commonwealth country. I lived in Belize for a while, and so that
Oh
feel
yeah.
like the
Okay.
systems are probably vaguely similar in all those former Commonwealth countries, and I'll just group the states for that. But yeah, in the states, there's a few different methods, and it really depends on what you're investing in. But if we're talking about just let's just say standard single family houses, up to 4 units, that's kind of
Right.
like considered one asset class. So we'll just call it single family. A lot of people will say it's multifamily, but probably the most tried and true method would be the LLC is what we typically would recommend in the States, just because of yeah. So it has a lot of versatility, fairly low maintenance, low formality, easy to create. Um, it's not without maintenance, but compared to an S corporation or a C corporation, something like that with more formality, it's pretty low maintenance, low cost, and it offers the ability to bifurcate the assets into different pieces, kind of compartmentalize. That's kind of the idea. So obviously, you go out on blogs and things, you're going to see all different types of things on whether it's separated by the individual asset, for instance, one house per LLC, or batch them together, batch them based on equity. So never put more than 10% of your equity in one particular LLC. So there are different kind of ideas and ways of going about it. I think probably what it boils down to, if I had to say, is, and this goes for your structure generally, it's going to be determined based on risk aversion, like anything else in life. More maintenance and everything like that usually means more protection, not always, but usually. So you have to find that fine line between convenience but also protection, and that's different for everybody. But yeah, there are certainly lots of ways, but the LLC would be kind of the tried and true. I think it's been around since the 1970s officially in the States, so it's a very, very well used
So just for our listeners' benefit, so an LLC is a limited liability corporation or
company.
company? Company.
Company,
Okay.
yeah, in the States,
Okay.
yeah. So
Okay. So same here. Same here.
okay.
And the cost. What's the cost to set up an LLC for somebody? Let's say it's an investor and they want to buy a fourplex and they're thinking, you know what? I want to have this separated in case something ever happens to my financial status. I want this safe. What would it cost? I realize it could be different in Canada. It's probably going to cost more here, the way things typically are. But what would be the cost to set up a simple LLC in New Mexico?
Yeah, so New Mexico is a good example. Every state is different, which yeah, that's what kind of causes the issue. But I guess there's even variation within the state whether you want to. For some things, I would say probably the client could figure it out on their own and just do a filing. So if you wanted to do just a very basic New Mexican LLC, I believe the filing fee is $50 or $75. It's very low cost here. There's actually no annual maintenance, which is nice. You never have to do a check-in. So yeah, but yeah,
Really?
so Most states require an annual check-in. New Mexico, Arizona, and a few others don't have any check-in. They're very hands-off.
Mm.
Some states have it every 2 years. Some states have it every 10 years. It varies, but there is a cost to that, or at least, at the very least, in your time. Sometimes there's an actual cost. But yeah, and then at that point, if you did it yourself, yeah, really the only cost would be probably less than 100, and then you'd have to go out and get an EIN, which is employer identification number here. That would allow that entity to create its own bank account so that it can actually, be independent of you. That's free. If you did that yourself, you just apply on the IRS website here. But that would give you a very raw kind of husk or shell of an LLC. At that point, yes, theoretically, you got an LLC for under $100, but you do need an operating agreement. And this is one of those things where you're going to hear a lot of different things where somebody will say, just go on the internet and find a template. But that's rarely the right way to do things. I would say probably almost never is that the right way to do things.
Okay.
So, yeah, the right way to do it would probably be to hire a professional, or at the very least, if you had, I have some people who have, they work, one of their friends works with an attorney and then they'll share the template among each other. But at least an attorney drafted it in your state who is licensed to do that. So that way you at least have something that's going to work for you. So
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
yeah,
When you're dealing with legal things, you got to have a lawyer draft it up for you, I think.
yeah.
What would
I mean,
now I won't hold you to this, but just ballpark figure. What would the cost be to hire an attorney or hire a lawyer to set something like that up, whether it's in Texas or New Mexico or just average
yeah,
ballpark? What would it be in the
sure.
US?
I would, and that varies too. I hate giving you these gray answers, but
Uh, Ballpark
yeah,
only.
yeah. So attorneys bill generally on a billing hour, and so that varies state to state. So you being in Toronto is essentially like our New York. That would be the most expensive place. Los Angeles would probably be as well. Well, the middle is where the rates are lower. I would say generally, if you're looking for something reasonable in the middle of the country, you could probably get it done from someplace between $800 to $1,500. That would be complete. Like that would include the filing fees and everything. So New Mexico is notoriously low. Texas is 300 to file. So that filing fee would be built into that 1,000 to 1,500
You
number.
know
So
what, Jason? It's still peanuts when you talk about protecting your assets. It's like an insurance
oh yeah,
policy in a way. And right now up here, to buy something like a fourplex, you're talking well north of multi-million dollars to buy something like that. So to spend $1,000 or $1,500 or something, or a couple of grand to set it up, to me, it's a no-brainer, I think. And you've got
yeah.
to do.
An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So, and I've never seen, I can say in my 11, 12 years of experience, I've never seen a lawsuit cost less than what, these asset protection structures cost. It's usually not less than 10 grand. Like you're just not going to get away for less than that.
For
So,
sure. For sure. Yeah. Okay, well, that's very interesting. And again, we're talking about two different countries here, but I think the concepts are the same. The
sure.
prices are, I will guarantee you, they're going to be higher here. Yeah, just because everything costs more here. I don't know
Probably
why.
true.
It's just they see us. We got these bullseyes as Canadians. They bullseyes on our forehead. They see us coming. Okay, charge them double, whatever. But
Sure.
the concept is the same. So that's great. So now I understand that you've done some investing yourself personally, where you've done some house flipping or some wholesaling. And can you tell us a little bit about maybe some strategies that, say, an investor might be considering? Because again, the strategies are the same.
Yeah, I think
Details
like you
might
said,
be slightly
broad
different.
strokes purposes, I've worked with investors. We have a lot of investors that work with the firm who are from out of the country, especially Canadians. That's a huge group, but we also get Europeans and people from other parts of the world as well. But yeah, the concepts I believe are the same for the most part. So wholesaling, I don't think there's really any way around it. You can automate it if you want, but I have seen that with wholesalers that automate, at least in my area, a lot of those. So it's all about context and the amount of volume that you can put out there. Obviously, you just have to go and try to reach as many homeowners as possible. Obviously, out of state homeowners or homes that are in rough condition, possibly ones that aren't paying their taxes, things like that. Those would be kind of the hot area to go for. But there is
Okay.
quite a bit of competition in the wholesale arena now. So my wife, she's a real estate investor full time. I am about half attorney, half real estate investor, I would say. But door knocking and doing it the old fashioned way and actually making telephone calls and showing that local presence is actually been our kind of way to moving forward, because we get so many investors kind of speaking of the coast. So a California or New York resident, they can put I mean, the amount of money that they have compared to a Midwesterner, it goes so much farther in the middle region of the country, Southwest, Midwest. So they oftentimes send flyers out. They'll sometimes make calls, but a lot of times they will farm that out to a virtual assistant or something like that. And I have noticed that the whole local touch has won out on multiple deals when people have been contacted by 10 wholesalers.
Interesting.
So specifically, boots on the ground, being able to see which houses are not being well cared for, actually going out on the so I because I'm an attorney, I have access to it, but the public does as well. So like the secure, I don't know what it would be called in Canada, but basically it's like the secure court system access, so I can see like probate records, tax liens.
You know
Yeah.
what, Jason? Up here, we don't have access to that.
Oh, okay.
Canada,
Okay.
yeah, it's a big difference, and I wish we did. The U.S. is very transparent that way, where you can look up just about anything. Here in Canada, we have these crazy privacy laws, where I
Oh,
think
sure.
that's a hangover from British law. I'm pretty
Yep.
sure, but you
Yeah.
can't get that. We can't get that. A lawyer can,
Okay.
but a citizen can. A normal citizen cannot get that.
Yeah, I've heard
It's
about
funny.
that in the UK and South Africa, so it must be a carryover
Yeah,
from.
yeah. It's even difficult now. It's loosened up a bit. It used to be until recently difficult to get sold information on the MLS, like a house. You had to get a realtor to look it up for you. Now it's loosened up. At least we
Oh,
got that, so the general public can look that up. But
sure.
there is a big difference. The U.S. is very transparent when it comes to things like past problems and registry issues and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah,
liens and whatnot. Yep.
it's very easy to see who's behind, who would be a good candidate to they just want to walk away at this point.
Yeah.
So,
Interesting.
yeah,
And it's
there's a
interesting.
wealth of information. Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned about people from the coast, either from California or from New York. Uh, in the Midwest, it's much more affordable. And I think that's what we're seeing here in Canada too. The Midwest of Canada being Alberta, places like
Yep.
Saskatchewan and Manitoba,
Sure.
where prices are pretty low. And you're finding a lot of investors, especially they're sniffing around because the problem is here in the Toronto area, at least I can tell you for sure, it's just so expensive that when they crunch the numbers, it doesn't add up. Even with
Sure.
3,000 a month in rent, just doesn't quite add up. So interesting times. Interesting
Yeah.
times. I know
Yeah.
our market is still percolating along, which just blows my mind. I really thought we had 8 interest rate increases in about 14 months. 8.
Hmm.
And you
So
guys
yeah,
had about the same. Now, your market, I believe, has started to cool off a bit, which is more sensible.
it
It's a,
has.
yeah,
It's very variable based on where you're at, but it has, I would say, cooled, but it's still not
yep.
stabilized, I
We
guess.
we cooled off, but then it stabilized. And maybe immigration is part of it, but there's just a lack of inventory too. A lot of people are just holding on to their properties, and I think
Yeah.
maybe the same in the U.S. where they bought a house for 200,000, 25 years ago, and today it's worth 1 million here,
Yeah.
and they're just going to sit on that because they don't want to walk
Exactly.
away. Where are they going to go?
Yep,
So we have
exactly. I like just
yeah.
for instance, so I'm in a town of about 1 million people. Normal MLS pre-COVID was, I think, 5,000. Like it is what we're looking at for like a single family house. That's how many were on there. 5,000, 4,000. We're at, I
Okay,
think, 1,200 right now is what you would see if you
so
were on the MLS.
you
So
know
I
what?
mean,
What
yeah,
is going on? This is what I need to know. What is happening? People just don't want to sell.
yeah.
And I feel sorry for the younger generation, especially for youngsters in their 20s, first time
Oh yeah,
buyers, 20s and early 30s. It's going to be really tough for them because there's very little to
yeah.
buy.
Rentals is the same situation. Yeah, sure,
Yeah, it's how are you going to afford $3,000 a month? Even if two of you are working,
sure.
that's pretty hard. You'll never save a nickel. It's pretty hard.
Yeah. No, I feel
So
very fortunate that I accidentally stumbled into this before things got crazy because I don't know how there are opportunities, but you're just gonna have to work a lot harder for them. It was just kind of
yeah,
just great earlier on. So
I know what we can talk about. A lot of Canadians have always liked to buy properties in the U.S., especially in places like Florida or
hmm.
or Arizona, sort of winter type homes. That's been a
Hmm.
very big deal. Most Canadians would like to consider that, but they don't have a clue where they could even start. How do I buy a townhouse in Fort Myers, Florida? I don't know. They were down there and they saw the sign for sale, but they're foreigners. They're Canadians. Is
Sure.
there a short and sweet answer you could give, or is that too broad of a
No,
topic?
I don't believe there's any restriction on ownership for Canadians in the country. Where I would come in with more complicated answers are, I know, and we do actually have a specialist on the crew, not me, but she's an international attorney and she helps with a lot of Canadians because I know there are some special taxes that you guys will go through if you bought a house in the States and then put it in an LLC, and the LLC is like directly owned by them in Canada. So we have to do some legal wizardry where we use like a limited partnership in
Okay.
Canada that owns the LLC, and that avoids some taxes legally in
Okay.
Canada. But yeah, as far as I'm aware, there's no restriction on Canadian, especially Canadians, owning properties in the United States. I don't think there's, generally speaking, for foreigners, there's not, but we do have kind of, I know, with taxes and things like that, especially estate taxes, which is the best way. But they're better for Canadians and Europeans than they are for other foreigners. So we have special agreements between the countries. Obviously, your country and
Okay.
mine are side by side. So
Right.
you
Right.
guys get preferential treatment on a lot of things. So
That's good. That's good. Well, we pay way too much tax up here. I can tell you that, hands
sure.
down. But and so that's good to know. And one thing I'm just going to say to the listeners out there that if you are a Canadian and you are considering buying a property in the USA, definitely talk to a lawyer, an American lawyer first, or Canadian lawyer, American lawyer, and also to a tax expert because these are important considerations.
Oh,
Big
sure.
time. Big
Yeah,
time.
you
Yeah.
definitely. I would encourage you to get a team if you're going to come down here. Yeah, for sure.
Right. Now, what do you tell Americans if somebody comes into your office in Albuquerque and they say, you know what? We want to buy this farmhouse in Tuscany, in Italy. What would you tell someone like that? Because this stuff it comes up.
It
I
does
mean,
happen. Yeah,
yeah.
it does happen.
What would you tell them to do?
The short and sweet answer is what I basically just what we talked about with an American attorney. If you were buying houses, you need a local expert. I can help you on this side of things, and I can set things up to a certain extent, but you're going to need a local expert. A lot of places that I've lived abroad, I don't necessarily have contacts there, but there's usually an American or a Canadian who kind of helps facilitate that type of thing. So, for instance, in Belize, there was an American slash Belizean attorney who was licensed in both countries and could help you negotiate that
Oh
process
man,
there because it is different. So
that's good. I know
yeah, that
somebody who happens to be an attorney up here in Toronto who just is having a house built in Costa Rica, and she's going to move
okay,
there and retire there. So it's
sure,
going
yeah,
on. A lot of people are just saying, you know what? We're fed up with the rat race. We're fed up with the concrete jungle. Let's just go down there in some tropical paradise and
yeah. There's
enjoy, you know?
uh, pr- pretty much all the places I've lived in Latin America. There's a significant Canadian population. So yeah,
Oh, good to know.
maybe
Well, yeah.
more so than Americans. Yeah. So
Well, you haven't seen our winters. If you
yeah,
were
I
up
know.
here
Yeah,
in Jan, you'd understand.
no, I understand.
You're
I
from
lived
New
in
Jersey. You know that, you know.
sure. Yeah, so when I was working for the Calgary companies, I was living in North Dakota. So I think it's probably the closest that
Oh my
so
God. That's
pretty close to
worse.
Winnipeg. So
That
yes,
very close to what it's colder in North Dakota than it is in Toronto.
sure.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah,
we don't
so I
get that.
have an idea, at least an inkling.
And you survived. Oh my goodness. Well, yeah. So you know
Yeah,
what
it's
that's all about. Big time.
fearsome cold. Yeah, long
Yeah.
winters. So I understand. I completely can empathize with wanting to be in the tropics. Yeah.
Okay. So we've covered a few things. Definitely, absolutely, you must speak with a lawyer if you want to do any kind of international investing.
Yeah.
If we go back to the domestic front for a while, fixer uppers used to be a big deal here, big time. When prices started dropping last year, that kind of cooled off because again, you're looking at what are you going to be able to after you invest all that
Sure.
money fixing it up, you got to make sure you're going to have a profit. So that's kind of on hold right now. I'm not
Yep.
seeing so much of that anymore, but we're still on a tear. It's just and no inventory, just like what you're saying. So
Yeah. No, that I think the markets there's quite a bit of a parallel between you guys and us. It sounds
oh
like the
yeah,
same thing happening.
big
So
time. Yeah, I
because
don't know where we're
the
headed, man. Everybody says where are we
nor,
headed. I wish I had a crystal ball. I could tell you.
right, I know, nor I. I mean, everything that I've read, it seems like it's a pretty even split between people saying it's going to crash or it's going to keep going up, and then there's some people in the middle that are going to say it's stabilizing, but it's anybody's guess at this point, I think. So
Yeah. You know what? I honestly don't see any kind of crash. There's just too much demand. There really is.
yeah,
And no matter where you are, no matter where you like you're saying in Albuquerque, there's no listings.
yeah,
The
we've been
demand is there. Yeah.
yeah, at least in the States, and I think it's probably exactly the same in Canada. We kind of stopped building around the 2008 situation, and so it never really picked up. But we have more people, like what you were talking about, and there just hasn't been enough inventory. And they're talking about it's going to be year. It's not like you can make a widget. You have to make houses, which that takes a lot of time. You have to develop everything, and so they're talking about years before the inventory catches up to where it needs to be in a lot of areas. So. Yeah, I don't see it. I don't see a crash personally, but that's just my own opinion. So
I see on your resume here that you were a property manager for a while. Is that
yeah, I've
correct?
done. Yeah. Yeah, with
You're
my
a
wife.
brave you're a braver man than I thought. Oh my goodness. That a lot of people that I know who were into property management, it's a stressful job. There's a lot of things that
It
can
is.
happen there. What are some tips that you could give anyone out there who's considering buying some extra properties and then having to manage those properties? Is there a bit of advice you could give anybody saying, don't do that or avoid doing this or be proactive on this end? I mean, we all hope to have a tenant that moves in who's a great tenant. They pay the rent on time. There's no wild parties. They maintain
Sure.
the house nicely. But is there any tips that you could give anyone out there that practical ideas as a property manager, so-called property manager?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few tips. And it depends on which way you're going into it. Like, so for instance, my wife's a realtor. I was a realtor when I was doing property management as well. It's a requirement in this state, at least, not everywhere. But
Okay.
if you're just going to be a property manager versus going to be a landlord property manager, I think it's two different things. But I'm going to say on the latter, if you have the choice, the area is going to dictate the type of tenants you're going to get. So I would be very selective if you have that option in what area you want to do property management. So a lot of the houses that we've worked in with managing, it's in a university area slash airbase area slash hospital area. So you get a lot of traveling nurses, you get a lot of Air Force airmen, and then there's also a Space Force contingent there, which is like our new thing, the Space Force. So
Okay.
yeah, so they're
Yeah.
military personnel, but they're very high end engineering type scientist type of people.
Right on.
And then the university, what I would gravitate towards, obviously, would be if you have the option and you're in that right price bracket. Obviously, like the professors, graduate students, all that those they're usually very great tenants. Same with undergrad as well. But um, but that's going to dictate quite a bit. And then kind of spinning off of that is tenant selection is key. Every single bad situation that we've ever had was probably due to an oversight by the owner or us being either not wanting to wait for the right person and just really wanting that cash flow. And I would say it's almost always worth it to just wait for the right person if you can. It's going to cost you more in the long run to just put the first person that comes through the door in there versus a week or whatever it ends up being to get the right person. Just that selection is so key. And then obviously having a good set criteria that works. Credit, at least in the States, the way we would do it was credit check, background check, employment verification. We're
Identical.
allowed, yeah. So we're allowed to also require that you earn at least 3 months the monthly rent, which especially with the prices going up, that is a really good thing. So that
We don't
siphons
have
out.
that. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Why
So
did
you,
why
you
didn't we
yeah.
think of that? That's a great idea.
Yeah, so tenant selection is going to be key, and then just from there, if you get reasonable people who are willing to take care of the property and communicate, that makes things so much easier. And then just being on top of it, fixing things that preventative maintenance is huge. Doing things in fall and the summer, shutting down systems, working on them, that prevents a whole lot. I've seen a lot of problems where landlords, specifically ones that are from out of state, they just kind of it's just cash to them. They don't think about it as an actual asset, but like these things
So
do
true.
have running costs. So yeah.
So true. Words of wisdom. Words of wisdom.
It's common sense, but it was hard won to be perfectly honest. Yeah, a lot of this. So
Well, I've learned a few lessons along the way the hard way too. Absolutely. And it's I don't know about there, but here it's very difficult to get rid of a bad tenant. It's almost
sure.
impossible. It takes months and months. You have to go to a tribunal to make a
Okay.
case in front of a jury to say this guy hasn't paid me for 6 months.
Sure.
And so it's a big mess. It's so important. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, certain parts of the country are that way. That's another reason why the coastal people tend to prefer the middle of the country is specifically the more conservative states, landlord friendly states. They are extremely landlord friendly, and so by that
Not here.
it's yeah. Hey, I'm aware of that. Like so, I think we tend to as Americans complain about things, but we probably have it pretty easy compared to compared to some other countries. So yeah, but California, New York, they're kind of known for that. Very difficult rent control, things like that. Very difficult
We
to
got that.
select.
We got that. Yep.
Sure.
So there you go. But real estate still, I always tell on a lot of podcasts I mentioned, real estate is still the best way to go for any
I think
investment.
so.
I haven't hardly met anybody who said, you know what, I became a millionaire through the stock market. In fact, I don't think I've ever met anyone, not one single
Sure.
person. But I've met many, many, many people who became wealthy through real estate.
Yeah,
Just
I think you
do
just
it.
have to be realistic about timelines and that it's
Yes.
not going to be as passive as you might think. So,
Yeah, that's so true. Well,
Sure.
listen, Jason, this was a great chat, man. It was a great
Yeah.
talk. I appreciate you coming on today.
No,
And
yeah, thanks for having me on. It was good to
it's
talk
my
to you, Rick.
pleasure. We should talk. We should have another one of these sometime.
Yeah, that'd be great to
And
do a check-in every once in a while. Sure.
okay, all the best to you, my friend. And we'll talk to you soon. Have a great day.
Sounds good. Take
Okay,
care.
bye.
Bye-bye.